and welcome to Conversations with Nurit. I am Nurit, speaking with you today from Budapest, Hungary. And my guests today are Robert Rabin, who is speaking to us from Los Angeles, California.
Yes.
And welcome Robert, and Gabor Harsani, who is in the other room in Budapest, Hungary. And the reason for our conversation today is that a few days ago, Gabor and I were speaking with Robert, and I happened to mention to him that a very good friend of ours lived in Hungary during the time of communism. And at that time, it was illegal to buy or sell or read any spiritual book whatsoever. She had to smuggle illegally and bring in spiritual books because she was so eager. Meanwhile, in the 60s and 70s, in the Western part of the world, United States and Western Europe, all these mini gurus were popping up, and people like Robert and I were headed towards India and living in ashrams. And, Hungary and other Eastern European countries were left in the dark as far as spirituality. Maybe that's a good thing, who knows? But what came out of that conversation was that we sometimes take for granted the social freedom that we have and the spiritual freedom that we have. And somehow from this conversation, we ended up talking about Robert's article that he wrote in his blog called Calling All Radical Sages, where he talks about the non-dual movement and how in their meetings there is a lot of talk about awareness, about consciousness, non-duality, but there's really no conversation about social events, current world events, and our social responsibility as spiritual leaders in the community. So that's going to be our topic for today, after that long-winded opening. And just to give you a flavor of this article, I just wanted to read one thing, and Robert, then you can take it away from there. And you say that spiritual traditions place spiritual above material, creating a false hierarchy and pitting soul against world in a struggle for supremacy. Very strong statement. Talk to us about it.
Well, of course, I have to say I don't remember writing that, so I
That's why I read it to you.
No,
I'm familiar with your lack of memory.
Right? That's one of the things about being a writer is you can always claim I don't remember even writing that. Yeah, no accountability.
Speaking of responsibility.
That's right. Speaking of responsibility. What? Me? I don't know what you're talking. What do you mean they had my name on it? I was an outrage. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yes. So, Nurit, you and I go back many years now. We met originally in the 70s in an ashram. Gabor and I, while we've only known each other for a couple of years, have become fast friends, and I know a bit about his history. So we have together easily 100+ years of spiritual endeavor of some kind or another.
Makes us very old.
Well, that's why I said collectively. We could put most of it on Gabor, and you and I can still stay young.
Believe it or not, one person who read my book asked me if I was 200 years old.
Right.
Anyways, I digress.
And when in our various respective journeys did the pursuit of the higher self or the self or soul, the pursuit of enlightenment or awakening, however we want to frame that, when did that ever intersect with conversations about current events and our role in society, our relationship to those events, especially what is the relationship of the emerging consciousness that we were cultivating with our participation in society? And we really never had those conversations.
No.
with all of the various teachers and paths and so on. And I think that that in what I call an implicit bias, which is a kind of unconscious bias of people pursuing any kind of spirituality, whether it's non-dual or dual or whatever, the pursuit of a higher knowledge. The implicit bias in that is that we don't want to do that in the context of civic living. We want to retreat from the world, right? We want to separate from all of that and pursue this separately. Now, I've done that. I absolutely will cop to spending decades doing that. I understand why it's there, because we want the sort of protection of an ashram, or the safety of being removed from what's happening in the world. If we go to Spirit Rock, a Vipassana retreat center in California, for a 30-day retreat of silence and mindful walking, we don't want to know that there was another mass killing. We don't want to know that there was more beheadings. We don't want to know that, you know, the governor of Michigan knowingly gave polluted drinking water to people. We want to get away from that. Okay. However, it is inescapable. It is an inescapable fact of existence that we live in a society. We are affected by that society, and we affect that society.
Mm-hmm.
Even if your spiritual revelation culminates in, I don't even exist, there's no independent self, who is it that lives in what society? Okay. No, Gabor, I'm talking.
Okay.
Don't start laughing now, because people will stop listening. I'm just saying that is a thread of contemporary spirituality. Okay. Let's say you don't exist and society is an illusion. But when you get on an airplane to fly somewhere, you still expect the pilot to function in time and space as if he or she and the people in the plane and the plane are real. And so, you know, you fly from here to here and you get there because a lot of people take the world seriously enough to function. So my point is, I want to resurrect the radical sage movement I started in 2003, which is to begin to have conversations in every spiritual realm, yoga, meditation, inquiry, satsang, whatever, that includes a conversation about the relationship between our spiritual work and insights and social responsibility and participation. Just that, not my ideas about it, but the conversation itself.
Yes, I feel is very important what you're saying. I mean, I was in the ashram with you, and you weren't allowed to read the newspaper. Well, there was no newspaper, there was no TV. And
yeah.
In fact, up until I got together with Gabor, I never watched the news. And I think looking back, I realized that as long as you're doing a spiritual path with the mind, then yes, you want to protect your mind from bad news. If you're dealing with, I'm going to have positive thoughts instead of negative thoughts, that makes sense. But there comes a point where there's a shift, and maybe Gabor can speak more about that.
Well, yeah. The whole idea about separating life away from spirituality is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, think?
Whether I think I exist, or I am the observer, or I am the observed, or both of them pop up at the same time or not, whether there is separation or no separation, it's all in the mind. the spiritual practices will not work unless it is incorporated in actually in everyday life. Only the universe or God knows what sort of a situation do I personally need to deal with and handle it internally and externally. So not participating in life, not looking at social responsibility or what's going on in the world outside me, and not including myself, me in it, is totally ridiculous, because all the stuff that we have learned will not work. It only works if we incorporate whatever is in front of us. That's my opinion.
Mm. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how to incorporate that?
Well, I will break it down to two steps. First of all, being a good-hearted spiritual person, I'm looking at my world, and if I see any injustice, of course I'm motivated to do some action about this. I would be motivated to vote for the person who advocates social responsibility, and somebody who would advocate the way that I look at the world, or that I the so-called helpful way. So I would go out and do what I could do while I keep my responsibility as a spiritual person, while keeping my heart open, while having loving thoughts, and while being aware of my inner peace. That way, I'm not only that way I'm actually incorporating whatever is happening in my outside world, in my inner world. And two things happening at the same time. I'm doing the doing that I should be doing as a person, that I cannot and should not escape from. Two, because I'm including my inner peace while I'm doing it, I'm lessening the swing that is out there. So I'm not only helping, but I'm lessening the swing, meaning that the negative is not going to go up so much. Neither does the positive. So lessening that weird swing that we're experiencing in life is equally important as actually doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And, what would you like to add to that, Robert?
Not add to that, thank you for that. Maybe coming at it from a slightly different perspective,
Okay.
which is the acknowledgement that we acknowledge we live in a society, that we are affected by society and we affect society. And in so acknowledging, the question becomes, how do we consciously do that? How do we consciously participate in society?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying we have to do it this way or this way, but we, to my mind, we don't yet sufficiently have that conversation.
Yes.
We just step away. So for me, the thing that I think is really important, for example, there's a conference coming up in San Francisco in October. It's Science and Non-duality. I'm sure some of the listeners have heard about it. It's a 3 or 4 day conference, about 100 speakers, talking about the relationship between science and non-duality. And I looked through the list of speakers and topics and workshops. There wasn't anything really relating to society. And you go, well, okay, it's not about that. It's about science and non-duality. Okay. or maybe we're having a 30-day silence retreat, or we're doing yoga or sacred sexuality. Okay, that's the topic and theme of a workshop or a conference. Okay, however, it's also true that in all of those various conferences, workshops, programs, there's breaks every hour so people can go pee. There's lunch and dinner. There's usually, unless it's a silent retreat or something, some social time. One expects air to breathe. There's certain baseline expectations. So my idea is that with the same level of expectation, we should expect to spend some of the time relating what we're doing, whatever the conference is about, with our lives in society. The fact that it isn't doesn't mean we can't make a shift. It's simply an implicit bias. I think it comes from the origins of a lot of paths, especially ones that were rooted in a kind of monasticism, where we do have that, Nurit, as you read earlier, that split between the world and spirit, heaven and hell. So we want to come to our spirituality here and somehow keep getting through our life. But the way I look at it, as I said earlier, the fact of existence is it is inescapable that we are living in a society. So why don't we consciously and purposefully and intentionally relate our spiritual activities, our insights, our revelations, our inner growth with that fact, to where it should be as expected as food and water and pee breaks at any program, that even if we spend 10% of the time, at some point we say, you've had this insight, you've had this experience, you've had this realization. Now, relate it to the way in which you want to participate consciously in society. So it's where Gabor touched on earlier. It's wherever we are. Here's a beautiful focusing point by Arthur Ashe, who was a wonderful tennis player and activist for social justice. At one point, he said something which for me is t-shirt material, bumper sticker, tattoo on the forehead. Here it is. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Maybe you go to a school board meeting with more intention. Maybe you start a national movement. I'm not concerned about that. I am concerned, though, about start where you are, use what you have, do what you can, so that we don't perpetuate this implicit bias where our spiritual work is here and society and social events are over here. I know how hard it is to merge those two. It took me decades, I get it. But more and more, I think we're saying, well, we can't escape that. What if, for example, I saw something just a few days ago, Lady Gaga, who's a very famous singer, met with the Dalai Lama, had a 15-minute interview. She was on tour and somehow they connected. There's a little video. And within minutes after that meeting, China banned her from ever entering China and apparently cut off all access on the internet to her music. So they disappeared her from China because she met with the Dalai Lama. And I just was thinking, well, what if someone found out you had gone to an Eckhart Tolle lecture and immediately sent you to Guantanamo Bay? Or you couldn't even go to his lecture because it had been outlawed. It was too much a threat to, who knows? But those are the kinds of things you said earlier, Nurit, about our rights and freedoms. We take that for granted. I can go and listen to whoever I want. Well, yes, now you can, but it was only a few years ago when Allen Ginsberg read Howl, a great world famous iconic poem in San Francisco, and got arrested for indecency.
Really?
Really? So again, if we pay taxes, and of course this is being recorded, and I want to certainly say I pay my taxes, unlike a lot of corporations, but in terms of the non-separation that we often talk about, we're not separate from all of consciousness, neither are we separate from all of society. So the way I see it, it works like this. In America, something like 55% of all taxes go into the Pentagon. So if we just play this non-separation idea through metaphorically, then every time a rocket or a bomb or a drone hits a hospital and blows it up and kills civilians and children, my name is on that bomb, rocket, or drone.
Yeah.
Proportionally, but it is. And I can't say, well, look, I had nothing to do with it. I don't. Okay, but that's where non-separation from a philosophical and spiritual context, I think, enters into how we live. Well, we're not separate from what's happening and how we participate. So I just want to at least note that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say what to do or what not to do, but I want to at least acknowledge that and go, okay, is there something I want to do about that? Or is there something I want to do about this? Where do I want to get involved? It could even be, well, I don't want to be involved. But at least make that decision a conscious decision after you've acknowledged you do live in society.
Right.
I would even go, okay, don't just fall into a default, implicit bias. That's the world, and I'm over here in my tribe of love and light people, and that's the end of it.
Thank you. Do you have something to add?
No, I mean, I'm fully agree with what Robert says. And matter of fact, I remember when I think I was in Canada when we first started bombing Iraq, Baghdad, and I was ashamed that I was a human being. I was watching it on TV. It was a shock and awe. Shock and awe to entertain us. And a couple of million people lost their homes. And who knows how many people died. And then we switched up the TV and turned on the other channel for some kind of a violent movie in which, we go and kill the bad boys and then we go to sleep. I mean, dude, the house is burning. Spirituality needs to be practical now. Get involved now. I mean, really, separating it, as I said before, will not work anyway. You might belong to a wonderful group of people and you can have some kind of an image about that or something. But that bomb that was thrown there, that shock and awe was part of me, part of you, part of everyone, and that's the base from which spirituality can proceed.
That's it. Gabor, that particular event, that day, is when I had my awakening from a lack of consciousness of my being in society to what led to radical sages, 10 years ago and so on. It was the exact same event. I was living in Sausalito, which is a little city just north of San Francisco. And I was watching on the TV exactly what you were describing, watching the broadcasters from a safe distance, talking about the bombardment of Baghdad, a city of, I think, 15 million or something, many of which were women and children. There was virtually no defenses there, and they were as if it were a 4th of July display at Disneyland.
Exactly.
Shock and awe. The exact same thing. For whatever reason, that hit me so hard. I went to the corner of my living room. It just happened, and I curled up, and I started trembling and crying. And I don't know what to name the emotions. Maybe fear, the shame that just this cannot actually be happening. And it's because I could feel, this is where my body became alive to the body of the world. I could feel being in Baghdad. I could feel that madness in my body. I couldn't keep it away. I couldn't turn the channel, as you said, in my head or on the TV. And I think I was there most of the night. I just was. So that was when I awoke from my previously decades of seeking a kind of transcendental oriented spiritual experience to, okay, but even so, this is happening, and I couldn't brush it away with, it's really illusory. Like I couldn't bring the Bhagavad Gita into it and go, you know, the hundreds of thousands of women and children we're roasting are really the supreme self. I just couldn't. I couldn't shield myself from that, and I felt it in my body. I couldn't get out of that, and I've stayed in that ever since. And I don't think it's a conflict or a paradox. I think it's a matter of almost evolving the understanding of how we do that kind of spiritual work. That ultimately, the internal insight, if it isn't going to be just narcissistic, has to emerge as embodied action and participation in the world.
Yeah.
You know, that the archetype of the sage, in my mind, is no longer Ramana Maharshi, who lives in a loincloth on a daybed on a mountaintop. That's great, but we need to evolve that stereotype. We need to come down from the mountain. Don't lose your awareness, don't lose your consciousness, don't lose your presence, but now you need to get engaged in some way. So it's interesting you brought that up. That was where I had the awakening that I was in it and it was in me. And it didn't tell me what to do, but it allowed me to acknowledge that and begin to do whatever it is that I was going to do. So what I did immediately is I started Radical Sages and worked for 2.5 years, bringing that message to the national meditation and yoga community. You know, I built a website, wrote a number of articles, gave a lot of talks about this notion we're discussing, not about the electoral process per se, not about voting per se, not about politics as government per se, but the recognition of our need to participate and express ourselves in society. And to know about what's happening and keep relating to it. So that's what I did. And, you know, here we are now in July of 2016, where in America, as you know, we have a presidential election coming up, which promises to be which promises to be yet another shock and awe experience. and the repercussions of which are going to be felt by everyone in this country and probably the world, whether or not you live in a hermitage on the top of Mount Shasta, or you know, whether your satsangs, you know, are in Hawaii or whatever. The effects will roll over all of us like the weather. So we can either be victims by default and just hope that we can keep going to Eckhart Tolle lectures, that they don't ever get outlawed. If you like Mr. Tolle, just as an example, or go to Gabor's programs. My modesty prevents me from saying, you know, attending my talks, because I wouldn't want to say that.
You'll get your humility award next month.
Yeah. There's more shock and awe on a small level. Oh, humility from him? Oh my God, I can't fucking believe it. But it, you know, it really is. Drinking water. You know, I just read a little story that there's something like 22 million Americans, some 5,000 public water systems that are polluted beyond safe levels of lead, for example.
Wow.
And you know, on and on and on. And I'm not just saying I don't want to elevate the negative. There's an extraordinary number of people doing extraordinarily courageous and uplifting and transformative things. Mm-hmm. So another aspect, I think, of our conscious participation is we get to help create the narrative. I don't want CNN, MSNBC, Fox, you know, Fox or anyone else. I want to help determine the narrative. I want to help determine the story we tell about things that are happening. You know, just a quick example. I just read this story the other day. A woman in South Carolina, I believe, single mother of 4, got breast cancer, had a double mastectomy. And because she was poor, had a lot of challenges and difficulties and so on. And she decided to take one of her daughters, I think the daughter was 9, and walk with her daughter from South Carolina to Washington, D.C. with shirtless, topless.
Oh my God.
Topless, in order to meet lawmakers, to talk about the indignity of poor people dealing with cancer and what to do about it. A single woman who takes this event, double mastectomy, walks the eastern seaboard. This happened just last week. In order to tell these, you know, to shirtless, where even police along the way were saying, sorry, you got to cover up. And she didn't. In order to highlight the plight of poor people in America relative to dealing with catastrophic illness. I'm like, you know, I don't want to have a debate about whether or not she exists, whether she's pure consciousness or incarnate, whether she's a human being having a spiritual experience or a spiritual being having a human. I don't care. I just want to bow down to that woman.
Yeah, right on.
Well, maybe she's a spiritual one.
Well, I'm not going to name it. But that's so I'm reaching out to her to interview her. I want to interview her on my blog. But, you know, so it's not just negative. It's what's going on in the world. Well, yes, we've got crazy people doing crazy things. And we have this woman. We have this woman. Yeah. And we have a group of kids in the state of Washington, a group of kids still in high school suing the state government because they feel they're not doing enough to preserve the environment and their pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They're saying the government has to do more to preserve the environment. So a group of kids are suing the state there's another thing. You know, so I'm not saying do that, do that, do that. I'm not saying what to do. But if I have an illness, you guys look pretty healthy, but from time to time we all have an illness in our body. What do? Well, we do whatever. We don't just ignore it, right? We're going to do something to heal it. So if we can feel that Baghdad is part of our body, if we can feel the plight of that woman in South Carolina, if we can feel this in our body, isn't there something we ought to do to address the disturbance or dis-ease in our body? How many millions of children in this country go to bed hungry every night? Is that hunger theirs? Is that hunger belong to a family somewhere in Compton or East LA or Oakland, or is it my child, or is it my body? So if we can feel as you did with shock and awe, Gabor, as I did, if we can begin letting our body, even though we're not the body, if we can let the body into the game and begin to feel, and we feel dis-ease, you know, and pain and suffering, aren't we meant to do something? Just something?
Yeah. Well, I just want to, in this context, I want to address the use of our mind, how it's such a wonderful instrument to build a bridge, build a house, etc. And or to invent a new water filter or whatever. And the use of mind as is, it does it wonderfully. In that context, it creates templates and narratives which really work, and then we get more and more information, which puts it into another template. We have another aha moment, and then we get more information, and then we build a better bridge and things like that. And then all of a sudden, we started to examine the mind itself. But while building a bridge, is wonderful to make distinctions and separations. This is a better piece of steel. This is a better blueprint. This is higher, this is taller, this is heavier. So we, in a so-called esoteric spiritual context, the mind started to examine itself, but started to examine itself as a limited mind which was used to building a bridge so well. So it extended it into positive mental attitude and extended it into spirituality, meditation, stuff like that, and attempting to get to know itself. We talked about unconditional love, and then we talked about this, and we talked about that. And because it's used to, the same templates are used to make distinctions about steel. Now the mind makes a distinction about, oh, who deserves what? What did you do in your past life? Perhaps you deserve this. Perhaps those people have a karma.
That's right.
So what we don't notice is that the mind is making a distinction that it's making, rightfully so, building a bridge.
Yeah.
Now it's making a distinction about unconditional love and who deserves what, who is higher, who is lower. And then who, well, okay, you have to be the observer, you have to be observed, and it goes on and on and on, making distinctions and saying, okay, we don't understand it, but in some way, God knows how it works, and then perhaps the bad karma comes out, perhaps this. So we keep in thinking the same distinct way as before. So the so-called unconditional love and unity is there as a concept, but not as a practical application. Awakening is there as a concept, but what we forgets that awakening is not a concept or a something or a subject to learn. Awakening is the goal, and the unconditional love is actually a practical unifying thing that we need to apply with our heart, not just with our mind. So the point I'm attempting to make here is that we try to we try to shift to be better people, get to know ourselves, and have better thoughts and things like that. And we continue the same templates as we had before. And in a so-called esoteric spiritual life or getting to know yourself, it doesn't quite work the same way. When Hungary changed from communism into so-called democracy in '89, I talked to my father and I said, hey, what's happening with this shift in political life? And he said, well, they changed the sheets, but the prostitutes remain the same. So the point is, we can.
Your father is obviously a poet.
Yeah, that's right. But the point is that if we want to make a change, it has to be a heartfelt, basically gotten change, not just continuing the same kind of mindset as before and coming up with spiritual concepts to justify our separation and to justify why the other person is like that and I am like that. I meditated more, I deserve more.
A question, though, is if one of the root experiences or ideas or philosophies behind, let's say, non-duality is no separation, right? Essentially, I'm not separate from, I'm one with consciousness.
Right.
What is the practical application of that in terms of, well, then I'm not different from the creation of consciousness. It's creation. How does the notion of non-separation, how can it be used to justify non-participation in everything that isn't our particular community that believes this? It's like, you know, how do we go from non-separation to everything other than this notion doesn't exist? Which is an idea that I hear a lot of, and certainly can witness, because people seem to stop participating in society. They might do it grudgingly, but really where their bliss is over here with this group that celebrates the that I am not different from the supreme creative consciousness. But, and this is my add-on, I am very different from everything else that created because I don't participate in it, and I don't acknowledge it.
Yeah, that's the. No matter how many terms we come up with, whether we start with unconditional love and end up with non-duality, it's we can call it red violin or whatever we want, chapati. It doesn't matter what we call it. One concept is not very much better as another concept. You know, really, I can go under and over and justify it. It's really an inside awakening unconditional love, the red violin, non-duality is either grown roots in my heart, inside in my heart, and then I'm able to act from that, think from that, speak from that, listen from that, or not. Whatever concepts I'm using without turning in, it's really irrelevant. It's really the moment-to-moment awareness of that I'm connected to everything. And not just in words, but connecting it through my inner self that we talk about so much. Talking about it is not enough. We actually have to turn inside. And if you turn inside this meditation, fine, but then you must practice the meditation now and now and now and now in this moment. So that momentary awareness of my inner body, let's say, that connects to the universe, where I'm part of everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Where I'm actually that loving space that really is the way to participate instead of just relying on new concepts and new explanations.
That's one of the most impressive questions that you were asked by Ian McKay in your Conscious TV interview was, how has what you've achieved, how has it changed your view of reality? How do you see reality now? And I felt that was so important because everything has to be included. The way you view your world, if that isn't changed,
absolutely,
then you can use the term non-duality to your your face, but there is duality. You're a new state and the rest of the world.
Yeah, the new state sees things as is, absolutely everything, everybody included, as is, no filters. It's not some kind of a glowing, weird person that can dematerialize and rematerialize. It's not those kind of things that some organizations spread, some kind of a mystery. We have to take off spirituality from this mystical, what you call pedestal. It's spirituality, etc., or whatever we call it, is for you and me, for everybody. It is simple. If it stays on the pedestal, it will stay in separation. And no matter how good the words are, no matter how many concepts we come up with, it's still in this mystical separate concept. It's here, really here, in my heart, in my inner awareness. Now, I see the world as is, no mysticism here. It's everybody's right. And then I proceed to act whatever I need to do in life, and absolutely everything is included. It's not a separate transcendent reality that I am now here and you are there. We are equal, but of course I am a little bit more equal than you are. So that's really where it is. It's from my perspective, we turn in, be, and go out and act. And before I act, it's nice to just check whether I'm acting from here or not. It's a place to come from. I think you mentioned that word before, Robert. It's the present is a place to come from.
Well,
As long as we are eating at the trough, right, then we should acknowledge that and relate to that. If really the world has disappeared and there's nothing but pure consciousness and there's no doer, nothing to do, like, okay, then step away from the trough.
Yeah.
Just disappear and have a nice day. But if you are eating, if you are using society, if you're using what we have in society, if you are participating, if you buy food, if you live in a house, if you take an airplane, right, if you get paid money, then play the game.
Yeah.
Don't pretend that you're not participating when you are. And if you have legitimately transcended the game, you should leave. Go away. I don't want to see you anymore. No, I mean, have a nice day.
No, I understand.
If you're not in the game with us, I don't want to hear from you.
but really, if you've transcended the game, then you should have no problem being in the game.
That's right.
Otherwise, how do you know you really transcended it?
Can you ever actually transcend the game?
No.
I mean, that's obviously we're going to have another session about that, but what are you going to transcend? Look, we've been to India, we've been to the Himalayas, we've seen yogis that live in caves, we've seen Babas that, Lord knows, don't eat, they don't drink, they stand on one foot for 30, I don't know, everything. We've all had experiences where the world's disappeared, and here we are. I'm in Los Angeles. You guys are over in Budapest. Who cares? No one knows where the fuck that is.
That's shady.
Except for the people who live in Budapest, they care.
Yeah.
But it's like, let's play the game. Different levels, multidimensional, but let's stay engaged and involved and unafraid of the complexity and messiness of living.
Yes.
And I'm not saying I'm not saying where to go and what to do, but I am becoming more and more of an advocate for what we're speaking about in general.
Yeah, exactly. We're not, even with transcendence, we're not transcending that out there. If there is a transcendence, if you want to use that, I'm transcending my mind's limited ability.
Thank you.
I'm transcending myself.
I was hoping you were going to say that. I was hoping you were going to say that, because that's what I wanted to say. But being a gentleman, I let you say it.
They can always count on you.
Well, not always, but thank you for that.
Be a gentleman.
No, but that's what we're transcending. But you can't transcend existence. When we were kids playing hide and seek, you cover your eyes. If I can't see you, you can't. It's like, okay, you can't see me because I can't see you. Well, you can't see me. It's like you can't get out of existence. You can't get out of existence. So, play the game.
That's right.
Well, I think unless you have anything to
add,
add,
this is wonderful.
It's been a very full conversation, and I hope you all, the viewers, enjoyed it, and I hope it raised questions for you, and maybe something you want to say. Robert's website and information, as well as Gabor and my own, will be on the credits, and feel free to write to us. We'd love to hear from you, how you felt about this, if you have any questions, or if you have any ideas of how you feel your spirituality, your life as a spiritual being, for lack of a better word. I don't think the word spiritual too much, but that's what we got now. How you as a spiritual being can better get involved socially and participate through and from whatever spiritual achievements you have, rather than keeping it as a separate event. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Robert, very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys. Just a quick note also for the listeners who, if you ever happen to be in Budapest, I know that Gabor and Nurit love people to drop by. They never give their address, but if you can find it, just drop by and they'll give you lunch.
I'll be happy if I can find it.
And you can have a nice conversation. They haven't invited me, by the way, but never mind.
Yeah, it was standing invitation.
It's always great to talk with you guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you very much. Good evening if you're in Budapest. Good morning. Have a good day if you're in Los Angeles.
Oh.
And everyone in between, enjoy the 4th of July weekend.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's the 4th of July weekend.
Yeah. And Canada Day in Canada. So it's all good. Great.
No more English meddling in our country. Yay.
Isn't that nice?
They've got their own problems now with Brexit. Anyways, thank you and God bless.